Good evening and welcome. This is Public Space Sri Lanka. My name is Dhananath Fernando. Today our topic of discussion is exports in Sri Lanka. We have invited an eminent personality on our show today, Mrs. Indira Malwatte, Chairperson Sri Lanka Exports Development Board. I warmly welcome Mrs. Malwatte to our show, Public Space Sri Lanka.
Thank you for inviting me.
You will be surprised, you are the second feminine eminent personality we have invited on our show.
Privilege.
It's been a great pleasure to have you. So I would like to start the discussion talking about exports. Now, when we talk about exports, what is the problem? What is the real problem with Sri Lankan exports? We have seen it has been declining over the years as a percentage of GDP as well as on volume. Now, what is your diagnosis? Why our exports are declining?
I think the emphasis on exports for the last 10 to 12 years was very low, and in manufacturing. I mean, we needed infrastructure development in our country, but I think manufacturing is key, and we have to think of the market size of Sri Lanka. We are talking of a 21 million population. So if Sri Lanka is to succeed internationally, we have to look outwards, and that the only way is that we export. If you may recall, a few years ago when Honorable Lalithatula Mudali was the Minister for Trade, there was a slogan, export or perish. It still stands today, which is very sad. I am talking of something that was coined 30 years ago, which we have not been able to achieve. So exports is a pillar of economic development of our country. So I think the whole country must be behind exports, which we are trying to garner the support of everybody now. I always give the example, if we could have got rid of terrorism in Sri Lanka with the whole country behind it, we certainly can get on top of our exports. Because when you look at where Sri Lanka was and where competitive countries like Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, all of them were. I mean, we were way above in our exports, but it has been stagnant for Sri Lanka. And all those countries have overtaken, and it won't be very long when most countries might take over. So it is now that we have to rectify it, and we are in a course now of trying to see how best we develop the exports of our country.
So what's the problem? What is the reason for declining? I know over the years we have been declining. Where have we gotten it wrong?
I think we've been concentrating a lot on the traditional exports. We have tea, rubber, coconut, and actually at that time the new kid on the block was the apparel sector. Now I think I actually salute all the apparel exporters because they still contribute to 45% of the exports of our country. If at that time we did not liberalize the imports, which is key to exports, because we have this mentality that we could actually manufacture from A to Z in our country, which is wrong. You have to depend on imports for exports. This is the success of the other countries. So the classic example is the apparel industry in Sri Lanka. If we still had the small weaving machines and the small factories of mills that we had in Sri Lanka, we would have never got into export. But that bold decision was taken when they liberalized the economy of Sri Lanka, that we should liberalize the raw material for exports. Of course, we were a little lucky at that time because we had the MFA status where we had free access to most markets. We started off as a cut and stitch operation in Sri Lanka. We had to have all the raw material being brought in, and we only did a value addition. But that actually has now the apparel sector has got into doing its own R&D, and we are actually creating a niche market for our products. So that is a classic example where we have to think differently, that we cannot look at only the raw material supply of what Sri Lanka is. So this is why when we were kids, we still learnt of tea, rubber, coconut. We can't continue with that. Another example of this is look at the rubber sector. We were exporting latex rubber, but EDB was very active in that, and we promoted that we have to go in for value added products. Now we have become 30% of the international rubber tires are supplied from Sri Lanka. We are the 6th supplier of surgical gloves, and that is all value addition. And we have come to a point where we in fact get imported rubber into the country when we do not have sufficient quantity in Sri Lanka. So, you have to look at it differently and look at what are the key strengths that our country has, what are our key strengths, work on the key strengths, and then this is where the global value chain becomes important. So, where if we find that our skills are much better or we have certain raw materials, do not try to do the full product in Sri Lanka. Let us take an example from the automobile industry.
Before we move on to that,
yes.
Ms. Malwatte, if I may interrupt. Now, I gathered two powerful insights from you. One
yes.
is we haven't diversified our export portfolio, that is number one, and we have failed to liberalize the imports, and there is a general perception imports are sort of bad and exports are good. But what you say is imports is an ingredient for exports. But according to my knowledge, when you import most of the imported items, for if you are importing it for a export purpose, are being released from tariffs.
Yes.
So hasn't that helped in boosting our exports for the last few years?
So I think it's the mentality of Sri Lankans, maybe because it's island or we don't have different season or whatever it is, where we have not actually invested in R&D and innovation in our country. So where the imports, that's why you have to have trade facilitation, which we are in the process of doing. Trade facilitation to easily import the products into Sri Lanka. And then here we are talking of maybe raw material, maybe semi-manufactured product, which in turn we assemble or manufacture in Sri Lanka and export. So the value addition is key here. Value addition is something that I think all our products, if it has to leave the shores of Sri Lanka, let's see that everything is added value in our country. So the two key things would be value addition and of course people to work on quality, because if you want to join the global value chains, then these two things become absolutely key.
So you were talking about the automobile industry.
Yes.
What was the insight? You were giving an example on how.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because now if as Sri Lankans we try to manufacture the full vehicle in Sri Lanka, that I would say would take years. But on the other hand, if we could supply using our technical skills of our youth in our country and use the rubber, the latex rubber, and just look at supplying a big leading car manufacturer. In a car, if you look at all the components, there's so much of little components which comprise of rubber. So if you could do some of the components which are necessary, maybe sealants, maybe just the rubber mats or the wiper blades, and you supply a big automotive company. So that means there's value addition to our rubber, and we are also a part of contributing to the automobile industry. So why we thought of the automobile industry as an example is we felt that there was a number of rubber parts which we could use the latex in Sri Lanka, and we also have a number of people who are now technically getting qualified. So we have to use them very productively and then to get them geared into exports. Similarly, we are also looking at the electronic and electrical components. We may not be able to do the full refrigerator or a washing machine in Sri Lanka, but once again, the components, because if we wait to do the final product, that may take us time, but at least we can contribute and increase our exports by doing some of the components. So we are talking to leading car manufacturers, we are talking to many selected. Now in fact yesterday we had a delegation from Korea coming in who visited us after 2012. So one of the things, they were the Korean Import Association, which has a membership of 8,000 people. So one of the things that we said is let's try and tie up with the automobile industry of Korea and also the electrical and electronic sector. Again, we are looking at components here. So we have to get used to the fact that we cannot do from A to Z. So let's go into this component sector and the assembly sector, because that gives, then manufacturing happens in Sri Lanka. So I think that's a way forward for our exports to grow.
So what I gathered from you is we have a problem in diversification of the portfolio, export portfolio, plus we haven't liberalized or facilitate the import process, plus we haven't joined the global production networks.
Yeah.
I would also like to question you. Now, you have taken the office 2 years ago as the chairperson of the Export Development Board. Now, what are the changes you have made? Because you carry a sort of experience and you know how the industry works. Now, with that experience, what are the changes you have made for the export sector?
We actually, as soon as I took over, because the exports were just declining, and
it's continued to
decline. Fortunately, from the last 2 months, it has started picking up.
Great.
And that is not considering the GSP plus and things, you know. So which is I think very gratifying, not using the GSP plus as yet, that the exports have started picking up. What we did was we actually had meetings with all the top exporters of selected product sectors, tea, apparel, rubber, the traditional sectors, electronic, and including high-tech products. And we asked him what are the main issues that they face to expand exports. So it's interesting when you talk to the top 10 apparel exporters of Sri Lanka, they are not dependent on Sri Lankan government loans or money or anything like that. It is just one voice: get us the GSP plus and open the Chinese market for us. So sometimes people think exports everybody needs these loans and money and things. So similarly, we spoke to so many sectors. Another sector was the fisheries sector, because we felt there was a lot of potential in the fisheries sector. We have the sea right round our country and we were not harnessing the best. But there was a fisheries ban. So the government worked very hard on getting the fisheries ban removed in May. That was a lot of work, because you had to do all the homework prior to them lifting the red card for us. The yellow card was given a few years ago, but nobody took it seriously. So we just let it go until the red card, like your rugby, till the red card was shown, and then it was a complete ban. And we were exporting very successfully to Europe, and the ban came to Europe. I suppose in a way it may have been a blessing in disguise, because our dependency on the European market had to slow down. So we started looking for new markets. Russian market was opened up. We invited Russian buyers to Sri Lanka. They came and examined all the cold storage and how we were doing fishing. And we have now about 10 companies certified to export to Russia, which was good in that way. But then removing the ban alone, in May this year, we have had our exports going up by 200%. And then that also opened our eyes that we will have to go in for sustainable fisheries, because that's the future, is sustainable products, sustainable food processing and things like fish. So we have encouraged companies, and now they have, you wouldn't imagine how large the ponds are. For example, in Trincomalee, there's a company who has invested in large fish tanks where the Moda fish are grown by bringing the fingerlings into Sri Lanka, and they are grown in these big ponds and harvested at the time that you need. And the thing is, you don't need catch it in the wild, so you can harvest the correct size of the fish, and then you still have a continuous supply. Now for things like that, if you don't liberalize some of the import-export procedures to get fingerlings into Sri Lanka and keep it in quarantine. So it's an effort by all the government departments to cooperate to help the exporters to be able to import, as well as when produce is ready to be able to export. So this way we have managed, these are some of the new sectors that we have been looking at. Then we also have felt that we have to go into more high-tech products, because the fact that, and to try and cater to niche markets, which is key, I think, because we don't have a large manufacturing base. So therefore, with the limited resources we have to maximize it. And how do you maximize it? You add value to that and we try and create niche markets for ourselves.
I would also like to, so according to you, the vibes that you give is the exports is picking up even without the GSP plus, and we can be hopeful that exports will pick up in the couple of months and in the next coming years. Am I right saying that?
Oh yes, because now say we have looked at, again let me take the example from apparel, and they say, you know, all the, by the time we got the GSP plus, all the orders for Christmas were all done. So we were a little late in that. But say come 2018, we are expecting almost US $500 million to come from apparel alone. The fisheries sector, we are expecting another $150 million US to come. That is in addition to what they are doing at the moment. So GSP plus is very positive, but we have to make use of it now. You know, we can't be thinking, you know, we have for a period of 5 years. That'll fly. So we have started having a number of forums, seminars to gear our exporters to think now, and these are the product sectors that you should be exporting. As if we take more than another 2-3 years, there are other conditions that will come, and we will be over the threshold of over $4,000 US, and then we will be weaned off the GSP plus. So I think GSP plus is just a window of opportunity for us to be able to enter new markets and be able to consolidate our buyers. And another thing we've been telling our exporters and discussing with them is, when you think of Europe, we have not looked at the whole of EU there. We've been concentrating on a few European markets. Then it was of course the UK, which is no longer, but it was then France, Italy and Germany. But look at all the other countries in the EU, which are smaller countries where we could cater to. So we have done a number of studies, identified new product sectors which can benefit by the GSP plus, and we are trying to get them to enter the EU market with the new products, so that there's a diversification of our product basket.
We have been discussing on the exports market and the initiatives taken by the newly appointed chairperson of the Export Development Board 2 years ago, the new initiatives and how it has been worked to boost the exports in Sri Lanka. We are planning to discuss more on this after this short commercial break. Welcome back. This is Public Space Sri Lanka. Today we have the chairperson of Sri Lanka Exports Development Board, Mrs. Indira Malwatte, to discuss with us on the exports and what we could do as a country to increase our exports in the coming years. So we have been discussing GSP plus, diversification of the exports market, the exports portfolio. You have been talking about the GSP plus. This GSP plus will not be a continuous tax or the tariff concession. Once we reach a certain limit or reach a certain level in our economy, we will be that GSP plus will no more be a concession for us. Yeah. So what's the plan thereafter? What are the new initiatives you have taken, considering thinking a step forward?
This is we are talking of a 5-year period. So this is why we've been telling the exporters, look at wanting to diversify. Don't look at products, because for example the apparel, because we are successfully doing apparel, but then when it comes to a certain threshold, we would not be able to do the standard apparels we are doing. But then you go in for more value added products, and therefore R&D and innovation becomes very important for the apparel sector to continue to benefit from the GSP plus. And as I said, the thing is of looking at new markets. Look at the East European markets. I mean, those are markets we didn't even consider. But look at the East European markets. Now, in fact, we had an investor from Cyprus coming into Sri Lanka. He visited Sri Lanka because he realized he exports to the UK market. So he came into Sri Lanka, where he was looking at a factory of having over 2,000 people employed, because of the GSP plus. That attracted him. and he was able to contact the EDB, and we were able to match a company who could work with him. And he also knows that though he exports to UK, that the GSP Plus may or may not be relevant to UK in another period of 2 years. But he's also looking at, those are smart guys, they're looking at that they're absolutely sure, making use of the Commonwealth contact we have with the UK, which the government is also working on, that the same tariff concessions that Sri Lanka will be enjoying under GSP Plus will be enjoyed from Britain also. So the GSP Plus, now that is a guy from Cyprus whom we never even thought of dealing with, but he on his own thought of Sri Lanka. And then we also asked him, why did you think of Sri Lanka? He knows of Sri Lanka for quality supply of apparel, which is an excellent one, because something we would like for them to promote to the GSP Plus is that we do quality products. Because although we have this concession, our competitor countries also have the concession. Bangladesh has it, Laos has it, Cambodia has it. So it's nothing that just Sri Lanka is enjoying. So we have our competitors, so we have to move away from that competition. So don't do the low-end products. As I said, go in for niche products, so that it's not a competition. It becomes a necessity for buyers to look at Sri Lanka to get quality products. So in order to encourage this, we have also started a few new schemes at the EDB, which we call the Market Development Assistance Scheme and the Product Development Assistance Scheme. So under Product Development Assistance Scheme, we help companies to get themselves certified, because although certain sectors don't need certification at the moment, for example, the fruit and vegetable sector, we export a lot to the Maldives and to the Middle East. No one needs certification there. But if you do to Europe, you have to have global certification and other certification. But it's a matter of time when everybody is looking at food safety. So if you have that certification done, which is costly, so therefore I think it is very correct for EDB to guide them and help them financially also to get this certification. So we can be on top of certain product sectors and be identified as a manufacturing base for good quality, safe products. So this is something that we would like to take advantage with the GSP Plus also, that we are not just the run-of-the-mill country, but we do something special for the world.
Since you talked about the region, the Laos, the Bangladesh, they also have the GSP concession,
yes.
So they will be competing head to head with us. I also would like to shed light on there are certain countries they are doing extremely good in their exports. Countries like Vietnam, countries like Thailand, they are doing extremely good. I would also like to shed light from your perspective. Now, the recent changes happening in the region, how it has impacted on the Sri Lankan context. We had the Brexit happening a few months ago, and there was a new president appointed in United States who is somewhat going for sort of a nationalistic agenda. Now, how this would impact in moving forward while we are getting the GSP Plus, how really would this the global political and economic dimensions would really affect the Sri Lankan exports?
Yeah, US and Europe will continue to be important markets, but as the EDB from the last year, we have a policy of look towards Asia, a look Asia policy, and I think that has proved correct, because if you look at the last statistics from January to July, the US market has been stagnant. Europe has done marginally higher than the previous year, but if you look at the exports to China and the exports to India and Malaysia, we have done extremely very well. So this is why our policy of looking closer to home, that we should not be neglecting look Asia policy, and that actually has worked very well for us, because if we were looking at just Europe and looking at these GSP Plus which would have come or may not have come, it would have been very critical for us. So this looking at Asia and looking policy has worked very well. And about the competition that comes from these markets, Sri Lanka is no longer very competitive with labor. We have quality labor, but we must realize that Sri Lankans are paid very well in comparison to most of these countries, and they have far more labor rights, all that. So therefore, we have to look at where we gainfully employ our educated youth, how they should come and help in the economic drive of Sri Lanka. For that, the IT sector is the IT and the services sector, construction sector, the high-tech sector of the electrical and electronic components. So those are becoming more important for us, where it is not more labor intensive, but more knowledge intensive. So again, if you look at the IT sector and the BPO sector of Sri Lanka, the service sector will take over the manufacturing sector before long. It is already contributing far greater to the GDP. And as Sri Lankans, we are proud, we are educated, we are smart. So therefore, we have to create employment suitable for the youth of our country. So EDB is very actively promoting the IT sector as well as the BPO sector. So all these programs we are working with a number of international organizations. We work with SLASCOM, which is a private sector arm. So EDB has a very close collaboration with the exporters, because we take our role as facilitators, and we always consult the private sector in doing whatever program that we do. And I think that the private public partnership which we have created within the last 2 years, exporters have got confidence back of what the EDB can do for them.
On your policy on looking at China, Malaysia, the Asian, looking at Asian region preferably, that policy, now do you think, do you recommend an agreement like a free trade agreement that we were planned to sign with India on ECTA? Do you recommend sort of a free trade agreement, and what are we planning to do with China? You said the Chinese and the Malaysian exports has been grown for the last 2 months. What did we really do, and in which sectors the exports has been improved? And also you mentioned the exporters, the apparel exporters, in one voice they said open the market for China. What did you do to open, or what the government has done to open the market to China, and do you recommend ECTA to be moved forward?
Yeah, I would be a promoter of ECTA, because I think people have misunderstood what ECTA is. Because I personally have been, when I was an exporter myself, India was one of the biggest market for fresh fruit from Sri Lanka. So we have, I think that's one area, because when you talk of ECTA, a lot of people think that it will be open up for services, and you will have an influx of professionals coming into Sri Lanka.
That has been the main accusation or the challenge.
It wouldn't be happen that way, because under that, it will be based on project necessities. If a particular project for investment, we have investment coming from India to Sri Lanka, it will be based on the project necessity of having those professionals. Now, for example, if you take the shipbuilding industry in Sri Lanka, now that's one sector that EDB is very, very actively promoting, is ship and yacht building, because we see a great future for that. As a result, we are promoting marina infrastructure development. With that will come marine tourism. So there's a whole lot in that. And one of the biggest issues they had was we didn't have underwater welders. So are we going to stop our orders because we don't have sufficient underwater welders, or do we get them from another country, but it will be on a project basis. So they will have to apply and get the necessary visas, similar to what we go and do in Singapore, or our professionals go to the UK, the doctors, all of them have freedom to go and work in other countries. So similarly, shouldn't our industrialists also have that freedom to get professionals into our country? If you look at UK, you stop all the East Europeans coming there. Who will do some of those jobs there that the people from Britain may not be doing? So similarly, I think on a project basis, it's not just giving visas for the whole group to come into Sri Lanka, but it will be on a project basis. So there's a misunderstanding on that, and I don't think you should stifle Sri Lanka's growth due to very narrow thinking. I think we have to be open on this. After all, we are living in a global environment, and if we have the same freedom of going out and working, I think for improving our exports, we need certain skills. Now, for example, the IT sector, some of them were very nervous that we will have all the Indian IT girls and boys coming into Sri Lanka. Again, it is not just anyone in the IT sector, but we had a dearth in the middle management and senior management. So, it is on those particular identified professions that we would be opening up under ICTA. But I think the free trade between our two countries, look at Europe, look at the European Union, because we have not been able to do much with SAARC, unfortunately. So, at least let us do the free trade agreements, bilateral agreements between countries, and benefit our people and benefit the manufacturing, get our exports going. You cannot just dispel that China will be exporting everything from China to Sri Lanka. How was our apparel sector so confident that if you open up with the FTA, the apparel to exports to China, that they were absolutely confident that they could help in the export drive? That is because they know they have a quality product with design components and they could easily enter the Chinese market. We won't compete at the lower level of the basic clothing that they do. We will be competing with our R&D and innovation and entering a high-end market. I think it's great that our people think a big giant like China, that we could enter that market. So, we've had a number of programs along with the Chinese government assistance, where we have had a number of trade fairs organized in China, so that we give exposure to our Sri Lankan companies. The gems and jewelry sector was flourishing, exporting to the Chinese market. Of course, the last year there was the growth in China wasn't so marvelous, so therefore there has been a dip in the exports. But the blue sapphire is revered by them, so the blue sapphire jewelry, all that we have a big market opening. Then another thing is the tea sector. China has its own tea, but we have our own flavor in our tea. So, it's Ceylon tea, which is internationally known. It's a brand now when you say Ceylon tea. And what, look at the population there, and what a massive market we will be opening if we do exports to India and to China and some of the Asian countries. You are talking of more than 1.5 billion people. So, look closer home where freight rates are less and where we can compete shoulder to shoulder with them.
That is food for thought for everyone. Do we really have to come on streets for ICTA, while we as Sri Lankans have the freedom to go abroad and work in Singapore, work in UK as doctors, as IT professionals? If we need to boost our industries, don't they really have the freedom to come and work here on skill jobs? So, that is food for thought. I would also like to shed light on the female participation. People like you, now you are heading the Exports Development Board, and as I said at the start of the show, you are the second eminent personality we had the opportunity to invite, not because we are reluctant to invite eminent female personalities. We are also finding it difficult to get people like you on board. So, what are you doing from the EDB point of view to get the female participation, the women's into this process, because in our population above 50% is female and their participation on the labor force is very low. Yeah. What is your strategy?
We are promoting something called she trade.
She trade.
She trade. Not that we deprive men of any other thing, but I thought we must give an emphasis to empower our women, because I firmly believe if you empower a woman, you empower her family, and then you can empower the whole country, which is, and therefore we, for the first time, we started a women's cell at the EDB, where we have emphasis on developing women to get into the export business. So, we started off doing this from Jaffna, where we are working with a group of women there. Then we have now come on to Kilinochchi, and will be students starting in Kandy and in Galle and in other parts of Sri Lanka. Why was it that we started off with the northern province? Because we found that there were lots of single women households there. So we felt that we need to empower them with being able to have a better living or livelihood for their families. So it's very interesting as to now when you look at some of the produce that come from Jaffna, you have the standard Palmyra baskets and things which have been done traditionally. But how do you gear them to cater to the export market? Can we get them to supply to something like IKEA? How do we work towards those markets? So we have a number of designers who are working with these women who will now get themselves geared. Sometimes it's just a new color combination. It's the same basket, but what are the color combinations? What are the summer fashions that are coming? Which that kind of information is not available. So it is, I think, up to organizations, government organizations, to help them that this is how we should do it and this is the finish. Now, for example, they've always had the Palmyra basket with Palmyra handles. Now, they have introduced, a few designers have introduced, why don't you have a leather handle? And it makes a major difference to that same Palmyra bag. So there are a number of things that you can come out from Palmyra, and in fact we are also trying to get down a consultant to work with the Palmyra industry, because you have Palmyra candy, lots of things. We do the hakuru, but how do you get it to candy? So like that, there is a number of products that can be worked with those, and then you see the women getting engaged, and things like fruit and vegetable, they can do it in their gardens. There is one company that has started work with growing the drumstick, the murunga, where they use murunga, the leaf is being used, they powder it, and it's supposed to be antioxidant and for aging, and the murunga powder is exported back to countries like Japan. And these women have their little land. So if you grow 3 rows of murunga in their garden, they have an income of 15,000 coming, which is an additional income to their family, as well as it's an exportable product. Another thing is the giricelia, where the pellets are being made. Again, a lot of women are being empowered to grow the giricelia, and then it's collected, the wood is collected for powdering, and it's made into pellets and exported. So there are, if you can engage women, because otherwise you always felt women could only do the chutneys and the little things like that and get themselves engaged. There are women who are doing very well in the IT sector. In fact, I've got a program on working with the Asian Development Bank, where we have selected 3 sectors. One is food and beverage, and IT is one, and the other is the rubber sector. So we are trying to engage 500 women to work under this program within the next 3 years.
That was the strategy by Mrs. Indira Malwatte on getting female into this process and for the export development process. We are taking a short commercial break. We will be right back with Public Space Sri Lanka. Welcome back. This is Public Space Sri Lanka. You can join with us on 2 Facebook pages. One is Art News, our first Facebook page, and also you can join Public Space Sri Lanka Facebook page. Click the like button, and you can join with the live telecast of this show. We are joined with Mrs. Indira Malwatte, chairperson of Sri Lanka Export Development Board, today on our show. We have been discussing on many fronts. One is the GSP Plus, how we can develop the export sector, and how to get the women participation on developing exports for Sri Lanka. I would like to ask you about now, what is the national exports development strategy? And you have mentioned in another interview that we have identified 6 sectors.
Yes.
Including food processing, wellness tourism, ICT, boats and yacht development, and tea, and one other sector. So,
yes.
Do you really think this is going to work as a national strategy for exports development? Have we identified those sectors right?
Yes, now we did a number of qualitative and quantitative studies. Recently we have done studies with Harvard, with the World Bank, with the ADB on trying to identify which way the country should go. So it was important that we drew up a national export strategy. I must emphasize it's a national export strategy and it is not an export development board strategy. Because when it becomes a national export strategy, every one of us have to contribute to it. Because as I said, EDB is just a small organization who could be a facilitator to this. But the bigger picture, every one of us has to contribute. So we have had intensive consultations with all of the sectors, and then we came down to that we would have focus sectors. And again, when we were deciding on the focus sectors, we looked at sectors that we could develop within the next 5 years and also contribute towards the diversification of our export basket. So with that, with this complete private sector, public sector consultations, having looked at all these studies, we had these 6 sectors selected. Now, why wellness tourism? Because wellness tourism will go beyond normal tourism, and that will also help the products that come for wellness tourism, like what the spa products at Sri Lanka is now coming out, Ayurvedic medicine, and we could attract people to come into the wellness tourism, because if you see again the future of the world, people are becoming very health conscious. People are looking at new products free of various chemicals and things, cosmetics which are free of all these chemicals. So we fit in right with our Ayurvedic system. That's why we call it wellness tourism, because it's not only products, it is also the treatment and the meditation, the yoga, all that sort of goes around wellness tourism. Then another product sector is spice and spice concentrates. Internationally, we've been known as the best cinnamon in the world is Ceylon cinnamon, which 85% of the world's cinnamon is used as Ceylon cinnamon. In fact, that is an interesting program EDB has done to differentiate Ceylon cinnamon from cassia, because the health properties of cassia, which is also a cinnamon variety, and Ceylon cinnamon are totally different. So while one can be carcinogenic, the Ceylon cinnamon has a lot of health properties. So we managed to get a different HS code from the international customs to identify when people are importing cinnamon, that Ceylon cinnamon has a separate HS code. Now, very recently when I was out, I was looking at when I go out, I always look at the supermarkets and see what type of products they have. So it was very gratifying to know at Whole Foods in the US that they had cassia cinnamon and Ceylon cinnamon, and the difference was almost $12. So we have a premium price for our cinnamon. Similarly, we have a high content of pepperine in our pepper, so that's another product. So we thought we must, instead of these bales of cinnamon going out of Sri Lanka, that we must be able to give value addition in the country itself. There are a number of exporters who are already working on value addition, but there's much more to be done, and we should not allow anything to go without the value addition as much as possible. So we are looking at spice concentrates there, that is catering to the perfume industry, the essential oils, catering to the confectionery industry, so that we have the concentrates going out from Sri Lanka. So one is, when you have the concentrates, it's less freight but higher value product going, and we get the value addition to our country. Another sector we have selected is the food and beverage sector, because we are all looking at internationally, we are looking at there will be issues of food in the near future. So food and beverage is something where we can harness our agriculture sector in Sri Lanka and be able to get them to do more processed food. Now say sometimes we have the rice, there's a glut of rice that comes, and the poor farmer doesn't know what to do. At that point, everybody comes running to the EDB and says, can we export? but then we must know the correct variety of rice we should grow, which there is an export market for, the long grain white rice or the health food rice. So now in food and beverage, we feel there is a major potential for Sri Lanka to be able to grow and process it, because if you see even our fruit and vegetable, almost 35% we lose the yield because we do not have sufficient processing facilities in Sri Lanka. So it is a shame you grow it up to harvesting it, and then you have a glut of it, and then you do not know what to do with it. So it is very important that we do the food and beverage. So that is one sector that we have identified. The ship and yacht building
yes.
Is yet another sector in the manufacturing, which again we feel
What are the main export markets for ships and the yachts?
Yeah, right now we are doing a lot to Mauritius, Seychelles, and also to Europe, because the yachts, especially to the Netherlands, and we have just got some big investment where we'll be doing some of the yachts and ships to Korea. And it's strange, but we also get boats from India, but we also export boats to India. So this is one sector again where we feel our engineering skills, all that can be used if we go big into this sector. And we've done studies with the private sector. There are a number of issues we are still facing because our regulatory framework has to be re-looked at, because it is the regulatory framework is as archaic as 1849-19. So there are lots of work which we have commenced, which will streamline for the yacht and shipbuilding industry to develop. And
the ICT sector.
And the ICT sector, because again that is one thing that we felt under the service sector that we can expand. IoT, programming, all that again where the young people can get engaged. And Sri Lanka has because of our educated youth in our country, we have a hedge, and the language that Sri Lankans still do speak English very well. So that also we have an edge on promoting the ICT sector.
Now, whereas we have tea, boats and yachts, ICT, food processing, wellness tourism, how about the technological products, which are generally the prices are comparatively high than the primary products?
Yeah.
Aren't we moving there?
We have electrical and electronics also coming in there. So that is one sector where the high tech comes in. And we work with that's like Slintech, the nanotechnology development, where we are working very closely with them to develop the sector. But I must say, though we have selected these 6 sectors, it will be just the focus sectors. Not that we will be not concentrating on the other sectors, otherwise there will be lots thinking EDB is now completely shifted on to doing these sectors. It's not so.
Still coconut, rubber and tea
they remain, they become stable, but what we do with them, we'll give them the trade support necessity that is there, where we'll have ease of doing business, streamline, give the logistics, organize all that so that there's trade support which will actually help the total export sector. Because if you are looking at it as a trading hub, logistics becomes key. So we'll be liberalizing all that along with the relevant government departments and associations.
One of the key bottlenecks that you mentioned early when we diagnosed the problem, you said I understand first diagnosis has been resolved, that is diversification of the exports basket. Now you have identified 6 sectors and yes, you are working on that. But still, you said many years ago our imports has been not properly facilitated. Have we put the right policies on import facilitation?
Yes, there is a National Trade Facilitation Committee which is working with ITC assistance, and that has the Customs, Quarantine, Export Development Board, Department of Customs, all of us sit on this committee, and this is in order to enable the free import and export of products with the minimum delays. And I think since the last few years there is a lot of improvement, lots have been done. Lots of people are thinking, government officials are thinking very positively, because with the National Export Strategy consultations we realized that everybody is on board. It is very important that everybody is on board, and this is why even the National Export Strategy was launched by the Honorable Prime Minister to show the national interest, the importance of exports. So, this trade support activity will be, one thing would be the liberalizing some of the, facilitating some of the import-export procedures. We have identified a number of acts that have to be re-looked at because they are very old. Now, for example, if you look at the Food Act, under the Food Act, the only laboratory that could test food items coming into the country is the MRI. But on the other hand, there are private sector labs which are far more advanced. So, we have to look at some of the acts which we are studying now. So, there has to be reforms done. The Quarantine Act was re-looked at and done. It took them 10 years to do it, but now it's just approved. Now there are new things that have come in. So, we have to be very proactive. So, some of the laws and reforms have to be undertaken to streamline the import-export procedures that are necessary for exporters.
Since you mentioned about the cinnamon, the Ceylon cinnamon, and you have managed to get a separate HS code.
Yes.
So, how important it is to build the brand Sri Lanka, because there are Ceylon teas going as representing Sri Lanka, and there's now Ceylon cinnamon also. So, it's important to build the brand Sri Lanka, because unless people aware about how quality is the brand Ceylon, we would not be able to compete in the global markets. I have also seen an article by Dr. W.A. Vijayawardena on what should we do on building the brand Sri Lanka, especially on the Ceylon tea, because tea is being still served as just tea, and it's sort of a warm a beverage or a drink where the climate change is happening and people prefer sort of chilled drinks. So, how important it is to build the brand Sri Lanka, and any initiatives from your end, from your department on this front?
In fact, the EDB is coordinating this, the national branding of the country. We are working with all the marketing agencies, with SLIM, with SIM, with the universities, as well as these things, and we have just got a project together on branding Sri Lanka, because I think all of us must have one aim and brand the country. On the cinnamon, EDB has actually launched the Ceylon cinnamon, and we have a logo, the lion logo is identified with Ceylon cinnamon, which was launched a few years ago, and we have more than 14 companies to whom we have given, who adhere to good agriculture practices as well as good manufacturing practices, and those who have in their packs the Ceylon cinnamon logo, similar to the Ceylon tea logo, will be, it's a guarantee and it's a branded product. So, we are branding it internationally, as when you are purchasing Ceylon cinnamon, look at the Ceylon cinnamon lion logo, because we are continuing with the lion logo there, because people have identified good Ceylon tea with the lion logo. So, similarly, under this national export strategy, there is to have brand Sri Lanka cuisine to be branded, so that whether it's other spices or Sri Lankan food and beverage, that there will be a Sri Lankan cuisine brand. So, branding becomes extremely important, because then you can differentiate yourself with other products, and you being a marketer, you would know the brand loyalty. Once you have the brand loyalty, marketing becomes a little expensive, it's much easier, but branding is very costly, So, EDB has initiated, other than the national project that we are working on branding Sri Lanka, for exporters, we have initiated a program to help them with their branding. Now, you see, we never had a brand of mango in Sri Lanka. More recently, you have the TJC mango. So, we are helping that company, and they're branding it and they're marketing as TJC mango, and they've started a campaign in Singapore. How proud we would be to see when you go to Singapore or any part, you have the Sri Lankan branded mango. So, similarly, there are lots of companies whom we have created awareness, try to create a brand. It's costly, you have to work hard on it, but once you make that brand, you feel very proud for the country, and people have that loyalty. Now when you go out and then you have in lots of airlines and you have airline lounges serving a Sri Lankan branded product, you feel for it, you know that Sri Lanka has made its name in tea. So similarly we are looking at other products, and I think this new scheme we have put in for branding, people are appreciating it and making use of it, and we are promoting that branding becomes extremely important. So we work with, in fact we had to get the Madrid protocol into Sri Lanka because there are otherwise we have issues. We have to keep branding in every country and it's costly. But
could you elaborate a little bit more on the Madrid?
Yeah, because once we are signatory to that, then it gets whatever branding, the intellectual property rights with the National Property Rights Organization, they would have to initiate it. So we are working very closely with them, and then once it gets registered in one country, you cover almost 80 countries, because otherwise what happens is, as it is, for every country that we want to brand a product, a company has to invest a lot, and every 10 years it has to be renewed. So that's a very costly operation. So it is very important that we are signatory to this protocol.
My final question to you on our show today is the number of institutes we have to facilitate the export process. We have Exports Development Board, we have BOI, Board of Investments, we have Agency for Development, and we have some other committees, we have ministries, we have Ministry of Trade, we have few ministers. Do you really think, what is your opinion? I do not expect you to make a comment on your sistering organization or an institute. Is it really helping the investor, or do you think the process is still yet a little cumbersome? What are your thoughts on that, the number of institutes we have?
The ideal will be if we can have this single window concept, where for investment you have one organization, and then for exports you have one organization. And I think Sri Lanka is a country that we can all get together and work towards getting a single organization competent to be doing this. Whether it's the BOI or the EDB or the Department of Commerce or so many other organizations and ministries is a question. And I think that was why the Agency for International Trade was being formed, and that would have coordinated all the efforts of all these respective ministries and departments. So that is something that all of us should work towards, and if that can be done, that will be wonderful for the country, because we have one policy on investment, one policy on exports, on our marketing, on our branding. We come to a consensus. So if we could all work on that, I think we can be.
Share your final thoughts and final words with our exporters, with women like you who are passionate on coming and doing business in Sri Lanka, and also for the community, the general Sri Lankans, how we should work towards the national export policy. Since you have mentioned it's not the Export Development Board strategy or the policy, it's the national export policy. So you have the final minute to share your thoughts to the fellow Sri Lankans, your exporters, and the set that you represent, the women of Sri Lanka. Share your final thoughts, please.
I think our exporters are doing a great job, and now there's a beautiful partnership that has been built between the private sector and the public sector. So I feel if we all work together with one goal, and that is that we get our economy developed with exports as one of the key pillars, getting in not only the youth and the women of our country, we all get together, we can certainly achieve what our goals are. We have a 20 billion exports to be achieved in 2020, and we can go beyond that. And I think it's a concerted effort of all of us, irrespective of whether we are a SME or a large or government or public. We have one thought that we all drive this export initiative under the National Export Strategy, and firmly believe and drive that we can be very successful.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Indira Malwatte, Chairperson of Sri Lanka Exports Development Board, for coming on our show and sharing your views. It has been a tremendous and absolute pleasure to have you here. And as I said, you are the second eminent personality, feminine personality we have had the privilege to have in our show. Thank you so much for joining us today at Public Space Sri Lanka.
Thank you, Dhananath, for the interview.
Thank you very much for joining us on Public Space today as well. We will see you next week, Thursday at 9 o'clock with Public Space Sri Lanka. Have a good night. Thank you.